Hello everyone and welcome. Recently on the Magia Record Reddit there was posted this image of the Magia Record iceberg. Now the iceberg is not quite as big or as creepy as the iceberg for Super Mario 64 or for the Legend of Zelda series or some of the other icebergs that have come out recently. However, well, first off, I'm going to link it in the description, the post and that iceberg image, but more importantly, to all the people who don't know exactly what all these things mean that are on here on this iceberg, we're going to go over that right now, starting with the sky. So in the sky we see a Team Mikatsuki Villa written in a really weird way. The reason for that is when, of course, the game originally came out, people didn't know how they were supposed to write Mikatsuki Villa in English. And I think there was some point where there was actually that name written down in English somewhere, and it was written the way you see on screen right here. However, of course, later when the North American version released, we saw that the official way that it's supposed to be written was indeed different. So that's just an old name that happened to be not correct. RIP NA server. Well, the NA server is dying, so requiescat in pace NA server. We'll see you again. Never, probably. Wings of Magius. I'm not quite sure why exactly it's on here without any other specifier, because what is this supposed to mean? I assume the reason why it's on here is because there's this, it's not really a meme, it's actually just an observation that most people figured out after they saw the end of Arc 1, which is that the Wings of Magius, they have on their robes this sort of yellow decoration on their robes, and this yellow decoration on their foreheads looks somewhat similar to the parts of a moth, which makes sense because of course they were protecting Eve, a giant moth. Doppels. This is also something that doesn't have a specific specifier on here. However, I will assume this is a reference to the fact that all of the doppels that are in the game, of course, they all have their own descriptions that you can find on the wiki, and some of these doppels are pretty darn fucking crazy. They can do some absolutely amazing stuff. Some of them even permanently harm the user. And even though, theoretically, from the descriptions, all these doppels can do some really crazy stuff and have some really crazy side effects, none of that actually happens in the story whatsoever, and it seems like in the story, doppels are just a strong attack and have no other side effect to it whatsoever. Being Maguka is suffering. Well, there was once this 4chan thread that gathered all of these really bad-looking screenshots from the original airing of Pura Mario Madoka Magica. And in those screenshots, there was also next to that put some funny little text where, for example, Madoka is beauty is from. And also one of these lines was being Madoka is suffering. And that is also where, by the way, the word Madoka is from. The tip of the iceberg. We start out with Momoko Pity Breaker. When the JP server was originally released, well, one of the first really big gachas that was around, probably the biggest gacha that was ever around in terms of actual money made for F4S on both servers, was the Kyoko gacha, because that was when the game was still fresh, most people were around, and also everyone loves Kyoko, so people wanted to roll for her. However, sometimes when people saw that they got a 4-star character and got a natural 4-star character, and they see the fire card, and they think to themselves, it's Kyoko, you got Kyoko, and then turns around, no, it's Momoko, I'm sorry, you just got spooked by Momoko, and that is how Momoko got this reputation of being the least liked spook in the game, the biggest pity breaker, even though back then it wasn't really a pity breaker because pity didn't exist back then. Pity existed on the Japanese server only after like half a year. But even so, she was known as the least liked spook in the game. Also, similarly, on another one of these ideas, right afterwards, Ren had a big gacha as well. And a lot of people really liked Ren because Ren is best girl, which even back then people knew. So people wanted to draw for Get Ren, and same scenario. They got the 4-star, they see the dark type card, and then it's a Kirika, and that's also how Kirika was the second least favorite character of many people because they remember getting spooked by her when trying to roll for Ren. Kuro equals Kuroe. Well, in the anime you have this new character that was introduced specifically just in the anime called Kuroe in the first episode that then sort of disappeared. But the idea was initially that if you just compare her design to that of Kuro, they do look rather similar, and it's rather weird just how similar it actually is. But also more importantly, Kuro in the game doesn't really have any specific character to her. It's supposed to be this anonymous character, that blank slate that just appears and then dies horribly. It's supposed to be a lesson to Homura, because Homura hasn't suffered enough, I guess, so now her actual girlfriend is dead too. but because Kuro didn't really have any character to it, but was well liked by the fans, like one of the most liked characters by all the fans, even though she existed in like 2 scenes and then died. People believe that this Kuro in the anime is supposed to be this Kuro like as an actual character, and also because of some of other reasons that I'm not going to go over right now, Kuro is very likely to still die before the anime ends, so would make sense that since the regular Kuro died as well, that Kuro would die as well. They, in the name, of course, I haven't mentioned it, but yeah, of course, the name is also almost the same. Yachio breaks legs. When first the 4th chapter was released, there's the scene where they're fighting against the Neis, they're fighting against Tsukuyo, and Yachio is trying to stop Tsukuyo, and she says something about Tsukuyo not being able to continue fighting if she has her legs broken, but she doesn't specifically say legs broken, she just says without her legs she can't keep fighting, and then you see just suddenly Tsukuyo screaming in pain, and it's not quite sure what happened. However, there was a Magia Report comic that came out very closely after this, and in that comic, Tsukuyo did indeed mention that her legs was broken, which at this point, and even to now, was probably, not just probably, was the most cruel thing that a protagonist has ever done to anyone, and it was against Tsukuyo, probably one character who deserved it the least, but even so, just that amount of brutality almost out of nowhere. It's not that really brutal. I mean, a broken leg for Magical Girl heals in like 5 seconds. But even so, it was very much something that people didn't see coming at all. And just by pure fact of it being so unpredictably out of nowhere, people made a big meme out of it. And it's kind of funny, actually. Sna. Well, you see it on the right side already, but I'm going to give it to you in big as well. Where there was this line of plush toys that look similarly to this. Probably the most popular of those being the Astolfo one that does stuff that I'm not going to say here, and there are a bunch of other plush toys like this, and people like making memes out of these, but especially the Sana one looks kind of goofy, so instead people just made a lot of memes specifically with the Sana plushie, and of course needs a different name. They just don't call it Sana, just call it Sna. Yay. Sayaka taking forever to be added. Well, all the other Puella Magi Holy Quintet characters were already in the game very close to release, with Mami being in there at release, Homura being in there at release, at least halfway so. Maruka was in there. Kyoko was added as like maybe the first big gacha after the release as well, so only Sayaka was missing. So people thought Sayaka was going to be added any week now. And then weeks passed, and months passed, and more months passed, and people still didn't have Sayaka. And then in Magia Report, it was even brought up that Sayaka was still not added to the game, and Magia Report is somewhat official to some degree. So you could say that there's even an official meme about Sayaka sort of taking forever to be added, and that's why it became a meme. Just below the surface, we're now going a bit deeper, and we will start out with Honey and Butter. Honey and Butter is a series of stores that sell macarons, and they are located in America, which is important because I couldn't go there because I live in Germany. And they had a collaboration with the North American version of Magia Record, where they were just in some of their stores, at least in 2 that I know of, where I had some friends that went to those stores and made some images, and was fun. And in those stores, they set up some statues, some figurines, some place where I think could write down a wish or something, and you could buy specific macarons that were themed after some of the characters. So if you wanted to, you could eat Yachio, and that was just something that they did, which was fun and never happened again in that way, but yeah, it was actually pretty cool. Rikaren, canon anime. I have never heard anyone else talk about this other than me, so it's possible that this was actually only on this iceberg because of me, but I guess I'm gonna have to explain it. So I had a series of videos where I talked about like in detail every single scene in the anime, and sort of talked about it with game knowledge and analyzed everything. And there's the scene where Rika sort of calls in to a radio show, and she says that she has trouble with her love life because she's in love with her best friend, who is a girl. And I said that since this plays during a main story, that means that this probably plays after her magical girl story. This probably plays after she already had her wish, after she already had her first girlfriend, the nameless character that she then broke up with. And this should also probably happen after she already got to know Ren. Meaning that since at this point in time she should already be close friends with Ren, and she calls in to say that she's in love with her best friend who's a girl. Yikaren's canon anime, confirmed. Not 100% confirmed, but let's just assume that that's what it's supposed to be. Rainbow Orb Monday. Well, that is one way of calling it. Most people that I know call it the Rorbening of the 26th of August. We will never forget the day, 26th of August 2019. On that day, well, to take a step back, of course, when developers patch a game or when they develop a game, they might make some changes to some values here and there just to test a few things. But of course, when you make changes to those values to test a few things, you're supposed to change them back again later. And if you don't, what could happen is what happened here, where during the Monday Awakening Labyrinth, the Dark Element Awakening Labyrinth, the spawn rate for one of the special enemies that drops rainbow orbs was left at 100%, which was probably done for testing, but they forgot to turn it back down. So if you went into that Awakening Labyrinth, you were guaranteed a rainbow orb on every single run, so people farmed hundreds of rainbow orbs, and of course the next day the developers sort of had to step in and took all of those rainbow orbs away from people. However, they gave back people a whole bunch of, like hundreds of AP pots to get the AP back that people spent on this, and they also gave people back a ton of rainbow gems, not rainbow gems, a ton of Magia stones as well. So unless you paid real money for gems to refresh AP for the farming, unless you did that, you still ended up with more afterwards than you had before this, so it was still a net positive for everyone. However, we will never forget that day when hundreds of rainbow orbs were taken away from us and turned into AP pots and Magia stones, which I like that actually. I think that's actually a great trade. Wings of Chargius. It's mistyped here, it's Wings of Chargius. There's a very popular comic, Magia Report comic, where you have a new, not a Wings of Magus, no, you have a Wings of Chargers being introduced to us with 3 characters that, I mean, they look a bit like Momoko and Tsukuyo and Riko, but there's just some nameless characters that we don't know about, and they go on about how they're trying to look for the salvation of charge discs, because charge discs are goddamn terrible, and Papa, the which is the name of the artist behind Magia Report, knows that as well. I'm pretty sure the developers know that as well, which is specifically why Ashley had no charge discs. But yeah, it is well known that charge discs are terrible. Everyone knows this, even the developers and everyone else. And so they made, Papa made this comic, this Magia Report comic of the Wings of Chargius. And as is pointed out in the comic, if you are trying to like store up energy for a big hit, Excel does that way better, like way better in every single aspect, and Charters is kind of shit. But of course, people sort of just took this as a meme and ran with it and made a whole bunch of other memes around it, and yeah, it's fun. Let's all work together for making charge discs not terrible. Yay! Kenji Miyazawa references. Kenji Miyazawa is an author who wrote a bunch of novels and books, and among them was, of course, the Night on the Galactic Railroad, and Night on the Galactic Railroad was also made into an anime later, and some of the characters that appear in there, well, their names were taken straight to Magia Record. For example, Iroha's doppel is called Joanna, which is one of the main characters of that story. Also, Yachio's doppel is called Campanella, which is the other main character of that story. So both main characters have their names taken for the doppels of Iroha and Yachio. Also, Matasaburo is also another name that was taken from there, and I think the name Shitori Egomo for Uizuich was also in reference to one of the poems I think that Kenji Miyazawa wrote. So there's a whole bunch of, I think Mifuyu's doppel is also a reference. So there's a whole bunch of other references that you can probably find in reference to Kenji Miyazawa's works, and that is why that is here. The deeper depths. We're getting to next up, Konomi equals Gertrude. Well, if you look at Konomi's design, and you note the fact that she's themed after flowers and a garden, and the fact that she has a giant pair of scissors, and then you look at Gertrude, who has a giant pair of scissors and is themed after flowers and garden, people sort of took that as a connection that Gertrude might be the witch of Konomi. However, not really that much else behind it other than, well, both flowers, both scissors, sort of run with it, because there's a bunch of other reasons as to why this would not be the case. And that's also that for the biggest reason probably is that all of these other witches that we know from Pulamagi Madoka Magica are Mitakihara witches, and all of these characters in here, they come from Kamihama, so there's no reason for them to be in another city. However, also in the anime, we see Gertrude around, or as it would be pronounced correctly, Gertrude. So Gertrude is in Kamihama while Konomi is still alive, so that also doesn't quite line up. And you're wondering, but you just said that there's supposed to be another city. Yeah, but the idea behind Mega's plan is that they get witches from outside of the city to come into the city, so they got Gertrude from Mitakihara to come over to Kamihama City, and that's why she's here, while Konomi is still alive. So yeah, that theory sort of sadly isn't that well founded, I guess I would say. Chelsea. You can see it on the right here, and once again I'm going to give it to you in big. At one point, the official Magia record Twitter posted a whole bunch of translations for, like official translations for Magia Report. There is of course some fan translations for Magia Report, but like I said, they're fan translations, but now they had official translations that they were posting, and one of those comics mentioned that Iroha was trying to pull for Chelsea. And interestingly enough, that was during a time where it was revealed that we were getting an NA original Magical Girl, and we actually already saw the way she looked. Like, they revealed that we're getting this new character, they showed us the way she looked, but we didn't get her name. Right after this, we get this comic. And so people saw that and thought to themselves that this must probably mean that the NA character is called Chelsea, which was actually a really strong rumor. So then the Twitter took down that comic, they re-released the comic, and now it read that she was pulling for Ultimate Madoka, and of course when Chelsea was released she was called Ashley instead. However, I'm still rather certain that at least during some point in development she really was supposed to be called Chelsea, but they changed it at some point later. We don't know why. There's still a crack theory that the reason why they changed the name was specifically because they accidentally showed it in a Magia report. I don't think that would be the reason, just to change her name because they accidentally showed it like that. However, like I said, I still think it's almost guaranteed that at some point during development her name was Chelsea. Irel Uwasa of the Misery Return. When the anime was first running earlier this year, they actually did some pretty interesting ways of trying to market the anime or trying to promote the anime, and one of the things that they did is a bunch of people from Aniplex, I think, they went to Akihabara and they handed out actual misery water around to people, Fukon Kounse, like the owl water, Lucky Owl water I think it was called, and yeah, you could just get a bunch of Lucky Owl water, and that was all that it was, and it just had a sticker on it that said, hey, watch the Mag Record anime. That was basically all it was, but still very interesting that they actually did something like this for the anime, because it basically means that they did more promotion for the anime than they ever did for the game. Ashley equals Senjo Gahara. When Ashley was also first announced, there was also this really strong rumor going around that maybe we're never going to get Monogatari. Well, that rumor came true, but not specifically because of what people thought, because people thought that we weren't going to get Monogatari because of reasons that had to do with them not getting the rights or something, which is bullshit. They always had the rights were definitely not in there, or that they had to pay a fee to get them included. Definitely not, that was definitely not part of the equation. I just think they wanted to keep Monogatari around for when they actually had caught up with the Japanese server. However, as we all know, they never got to actually catch up with the Japanese server, and so Monogatari went down the drain as well. However, there was still a rumor that people had around that time that Monogatari was just cancelled because of some rights. Like I said, it was bullshit. But because that rumor was around and people saw that Ashley was getting announced, people thought to themselves, maybe Ashley is just going to be the replacement for Senjo Gahara, because people assume that Ashley might also be a dark type, and they just assume that Ashley might also be a Blast Gorilla. Both happen to be correct, although they happen to be a Blast Godzilla actually. But even so, it's still somewhat correct that she was at least a dark type Blast Gorilla, but she was definitely not supposed to be the replacement for Senjo Gahara. But still, like I said, was a powerful rumor back in the day. Emily's Wish. We never actually found out what Emily's Wish was. even during her magical story, I think there were multiple parts where she kind of was going to talk about her wish, but then got cut off or had something else to do. So we never actually got specifically around to what her wish was. However, it is almost at 99.9% confirmed at this point that we actually kind of do know what her wish is, because I think at some way later point, I don't know exactly where it was, but there was another point, it might have even been in the Japanese portion, where it was shown that Emily's wish was indeed to be closer to her big sis. Although, since it was a translation, we still don't know if big sis means her actual sister or just someone else who she looked up to. But her wish is she wanted to be like someone that she admired. And it does make me wonder who that character must be, because she turned into a succubus, at least like looking like a succubus. So was that person she wanted to be like a pole dancer? We don't know. The bottom of the iceberg. The main thing here is that Asuka was a main character, was a pretty strong rumor that is still around to this day. If you look into the way that internally, like in the programming of the game, all of the characters are numbered. All the characters have a number, they all have an ID. You can actually look up that ID on the fandom wiki as well. And in those ID ranges, you see that all of the main characters are bunched up in one area, and all of the side characters are bunched up in another area. So all of these characters are all bunched up depending on what sort of character they are. But there's one character that defies all of that, which is Asuka, which for some reason is bunched right in the middle with the main characters. Not just that, she's also drawn by Aoki Ume, who a lot of people have said only draws main characters. And even further so, she's also the only other character other than other main characters who's gotten a flower field memoria that you see on the right, and I'm going to also blow up for you guys. So this is actually not just a rumor, there's actually something that was also probably true at some point in earlier development, that they wanted Asuka to play some sort of main character role, but at some point they just scrapped that. But they still had it already programmed that way. They probably already had the art done for it. What we don't know is if she changed as a character, like was she always supposed to be the character that she was right now, or was her personality changed after she was turned into like a side character? Because I don't think that she was supposed to be this much of a joke main character, like as a main character. But we will never know. So let's move on. Kirika's doppel has the wrong name. There's an interesting bit, but it's more so, actually, to be completely honest, it's more so that people just assumed the wrong name for Kirika's witch way earlier, and the doppel sort of cleared it up what the correct name was. So in the Oriko Magica manga, there's a point where Kirika witches out, spoiler alert, I mean, you already know about that if you're watching this anyway, and in the barrier, in the labyrinth for Kirika's witch, there's just a sign that seems like it says like Margot's Playground or something like that, and it has the name Margot in it, so people just assumed that the name of the witch must be Margot, right? Well, then later when the doppel actually came out, it was revealed that the name was Latria, and that Margot's Playground had absolutely nothing to do with her name whatsoever, although it's still possible that her name was actually changed and it was supposed to be Margot originally, especially because Margot is a German name and all the other witches had German names, so it would have actually lined up with that. However, the doppel is now called Latria. Himika originally 3-star. I don't have the screenshot for this anymore, but there was, especially during the very early development stages of the game, when they would just post random images of the game for promotional material, or maybe just to promote it to other developers, while the game was still in heavy development, like even pre-alpha. And one of those screenshots did indeed show an early version where Himika was shown as a 3-star character. Now, if you look at Himika's stats and just in general, we realize that Himika is actually god-awful. And because I always say this myself, that Himika is probably one of the worst, if not the worst magical girl in the game, probably alongside Tsukuyo. And it would make sense that she was originally a 3-star that was just scaled up to be a 4-star, because she's just that terrible. Mitama equals Walpurgisnacht. This is still a very strong rumor, and it was extremely powerful back in the day. You just could not get people to like stop talking about this rumor, because it just looked so right. Mitama, her outfit looks so much like the outfit for Walpurgisnacht. Not just that, because of Mitama's position as an adjuster who seemed to be two-faced. A lot of people originally thought that Mitama might be the final boss, that Mitama is the most evil character in the entire game, and not just because she tries to loot people. Well, that would actually make you a good character. Anyway, so because they thought that Mitama was hiding something, and because of the way she looked, people thought she was going to be Walpurgisnacht. Some other people said that that can't be right, because Walpurgisnacht is supposed to be a collection of multiple witches, not just one witch. However, of course, we later found out that that was not quite true. However, just before we actually found out that wasn't true, because Walpurgisnacht already exists, and Mitama is right there, so we know they're not the same. We also, before that, saw her magical girl story. However, in her magical girl story, she actually makes the wish to be the one to destroy Kamehama. So at that point, the groomer actually gained a lot more traction, and a lot more people thought that Mitama definitely must be Walpurgisnacht. Although, like I said, later on in Arc 1, it was shown that that just wasn't the case. Light Attribute Mel. I don't think there was actually that strong of a rumor when it was around. However, there was a sort of event where I think it wasn't quite the training for Mel's uncap, but I think it was a rerun of the event that had Mel and Kane in it. And in that event, there was a sort of new side story where Mifuyu and Iacho, they sort of went out to defeat Mel's witch, because apparently they never did defeat Mel's witch. And when you fight that witch, you actually get to indeed fight that witch, which is interesting because they like made a specific model with specific attacks just for that one single fight, and then never reused that model, even though they usually reuse all the other models as much as they can, even if it makes no sense. And that witch that you fight, I think Etail or something is it called, is a light type. And so people said, wait a second, if this witch is a light type, but Mel is forest type, did they accidentally give it the wrong element, or was Mel always supposed to be a light type? I don't really care. The Darkest Depths. Tsurushi-sawa is why NA was discontinued. This is a very recent rumor. I don't know why it's this far down, because it's a rumor that I've heard quite a lot actually recently, so it's not actually that unknown. So in case you have never read Tsurushi-sawa's Magical Girl story, a guy comes to Tsuruchi's school when she was like 10 years old, 12 years old or something, and basically kills her entire fucking classroom. Like dozens and dozens upon little kids get shot and ripped to pieces in front of Tsuruchi's eyes. In fact, Tsuruchi specifically wished to be the only survivor, and specifically made it so that everyone else around her died. That's pretty fucking brutal. And because of that, people thought that, oh my god, they're never going to put this into the North American version. They're never going to put it into the North American version. That Tsuruchi basically got dozens of little kids shot to death at school, in a school shooting. People thought that either they were going to like remove the MSS and just act like she doesn't have one, like lock it forever and just say, we're going to unlock this magical story, never. Or maybe they're going to rewrite it or something like that. However, of course, NA was discontinued and it got ended, and so there's this crack theory that the only reason why they ended NA was because they couldn't figure out what to do with Tsuruchi's backstory. Although we all know the only reason why NA died is because it didn't make any money. Aimi is the only heterosexual. If you just look at all of these characters of the Magical Girls and see who they usually get shipped with, who they are interested in, you will see that basically every single character in the game has some sort of ship with another Magical Girl, with another character. However, Aimi is the only character who doesn't really have any good ship whatsoever, and also is specifically in love with a guy. So if you combine both of those facts, it kind of seems like she's the only character in the entire game who just looks like she's heterosexual. Although there are a bunch of other characters that I would argue probably are heterosexual, but you can always say like, oh well, but even if they say they're interested in guys, they could still be bisexual, right? Which is true, with one exception. And this is actually something that I would have added down here. If I made this Iceberg, I would have added that down there. I would have not said Aimi is the only heterosexual, I would have said Akira is the only non-lesbian character. Because Akira specifically says in the Magical Girl story that she's not into girls. And she's the only character in the entire game who specifically says that. No other character ever says that they're not into girls. So I would have changed that on. I would have just put like Akira's the only non-lesbian, which I think is a lot more like interesting of a fact than Aimi is the only heterosexual. Kokoro and Ren originally not 4 stars. I don't know why this rumor actually became a rumor, because I don't think it's actually that strong whatsoever, like that's well founded at all. The thing is, if you there was a rerun for both Ren's and Kokoro's events like a year or so after the game was released, and during those reruns both Ren and Kokoro actually got special new animations. Not completely new animations, but they got new special effects. So, for example, you will see that Ren's staff in this image is glowing blue when it wasn't glowing before. And the thing is, people looked at that and they compared it to other characters that aren't 4 stars. For example, Yachio, that when they reach 5-star in their uncap, they also get special effects. For example, also Yachio's weapon starts glowing blue with water around it, and that's basically the same for every single other lower rarity character. Whenever they get uncapped to 5-star, they get a special effect around their weapon. However, Kokoro and Ren, they also got a special effect around their weapon, just randomly added in a patch. But no other 4-star character got that, which is why people believed that originally they weren't 4 stars, they were only later turned into 4 stars, but they always were supposed to have those special effects when they reach 5-star. Yeah, but I think they just decided to give them effects because they look shit. I think that's basically all that happened. That they didn't look good enough, so they just added some effects. Yeah, I think that's just literally all that is. Quantum Rainbow Orbs. I looked this up and talked to the guy who made the Reddit thread, and apparently it's just an in-joke between him and some other guys, maybe. I don't know what else to say there. Stolen Fire Emblem assets. If you look on the right here, I'm going to blow it up as well. There was, like I said earlier, in the very early games, early stages of development, especially when some of the pre-alpha screenshots were thrown around, there was a pre-alpha screenshot that showed how you can get to Magia, and it showed the Magia bar getting to full, and then it said, hey, Magia bar is full, you can use Magia now. However, if you look at those two little icons to the right side of the Magia bar, little green and purple icon, those are both icons ripped straight from Fire Emblem. The Astra and Gale Force symbols, I think. And the thing is, I don't actually think this is this big of a deal, because when you're a developer early on in stages of development, basically every developer does this, where they just use random placeholder assets, and they just happen to take placeholder assets from another game. I mean, that can happen. Like, there's just placeholder assets, fine. They should have probably still removed them for screenshots that were going to get posted publicly. But yeah, like aside from that, if we're talking about them using this privately, yeah, developers just do that. Developers just privately, when they're just testing out stuff, they use placeholder stuff all over the place. They might just use stuff from other games as well. There's a bunch of, I don't have any on hand right now, but if you just watch a bunch of game developer conference talks from people about early stages of developments, they'll usually have some funny anecdote, like at some point in development, all our characters had the face of a curry recipe that I found on the internet or something like that, where they just had a really random placeholder asset in there, and I think it's something like this as well. But yeah, like I said, they shouldn't have put that in a screenshot that was going to get posted publicly. That was kind of a fuck up. But yeah, that was the big iceberg for Magia Record. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys next time.